I'm really excited to be here with Carolin Hauser. She is a German-trained naturopathic doctor, family constellations facilitator, and intimacy expert. She's also the author of the award-winning book, Blossom, 7 Steps to Sexual Healing, and the creatrix of the Blissful Marriage Method. She also, besides supporting couples in their homes and virtually, she is based in Sedona, Arizona, and supports couples in retreats, both in Sedona and other locations around the world. And so we're really excited to have Carolin with us today to be speaking to us about, what she'll be talking about at the Ascension of the Soul conference, as well as her journey to becoming who she is today as this intimacy expert.
Tangelia, can I just ask you, what is the Ascension of the Soul conference all about? So we get a
Sure. That's a great question. So the Ascension of the Soul conference is a 2-day online conference that we are co-hosting and co-producing with Portal to Ascension. And it is a conference that helps us do a deep dive into all aspects of ascension. We have 25 speakers over 2 days speaking about various different aspects. Joan of Angels talking about the angelic frequencies in ascension. Melissa Fike talking about quantum akashic records in ascension. Raquel Spring speaking about astrological perspective. Deborah Giusti giving a blueprint. Scott Katamas talking about managing our animal bodies during ascension. So it's really exciting because we have 2 days of downloads, activations, and practices from all of these different types of healers and experts and guides to really help support people in their own awakening and ascension process. And the conference is absolutely free. So we are really inviting everyone to come join us for these 2 days and dive in, interact with our speakers, get to know them better, and get these downloads. It's going to be a truly exciting experience.
Maybe I'll stream it on my channel too. So, right? Are you streaming it?
Yeah, we're streaming it. So that would be awesome, Alan.
Let's stream it on New Realities for sure. That would be so good. So, Carolin, I'm so happy you're here because the first part of Ascension, I think, is intimacy, is dealing with other humans. And if you can't deal with the other humans, you're not going anywhere. You've just bought yourself another lifetime, as they say. So how does that fit in? How does intimacy for you fit in with this a kind of spiritual awakening? Because people sometimes separate the emotional from the spiritual. So how does it work for you?
Well, first of all, we as a human species need to realize that we're really nothing without anybody else, right? We have this illusion of being like the lone wolf, or that we are independent and can do things on our own, and it's not really like that. And also, there's really 3 big areas on the world where there's tension or a lot of struggle. One is obviously the earth itself and the environment. The other one is like social justice and political stuff, and then the third one is actually men and women getting along. It's huge. So I'll just share a little bit of my own story because it has to do with this third problem. I literally remember being on the Heavenly Meadows. It looked like a kindergarten. We were all sitting on little chairs and little wooden chairs and tables. And God came and said, we need help. The earth needs help. We need people to go down there and help them with their relationships. And my hand just raised itself automatically without me being able to do anything. And that kind of got me a ticket into my mom's belly. And then, being here, I'm like, oh God, what did I get myself into? Because obviously or maybe not obviously, but when you raise your hand to help people with relationships, it would make a lot of sense that God would put you through a lot of relationship struggles so that you come out the other end an expert. To make a long story short. So in my own development, in my own ascension, figuring this piece out and figuring out how I can be peaceful within myself and then with the masculine in my life, has helped me elevate greatly. So therefore, the assumption that if we can figure this out together for all of us, we'll be ascending much easier and more peacefully and smoother.
Oh, Alan,
I can't hear you.
I hate when that happens. Okay. Yes. What have you figured out what have you, so we can kind of miss the messy steps that
Yeah. No more of the I had a lot of messy steps, and eventually about 6 years ago, a friend of mine couldn't take it anymore, and she had come across a book that was very controversial, too controversial for her. But since I was very desperate and was really looking for the solution, I read the book and it made a lot of sense. And in that book, the woman who wrote the book, her story was very similar to mine. So I kind of related to her. And in the book, the discovery that she describes or made, basically, that resonated so deeply with me, and I now think is the solution, is that basically as human beings, we have two programs for lovemaking. And one is really just there for us to procreate. It's our lower nature, basically. And there's one that's connected to our higher nature that's there for us to unify and connect deeply and bond deeply and create lots of harmony and peace. And yes, so basically the discovery that I've made through her is that there is really these two ways of lovemaking, and they have to do with our neuroscience and our brain chemistry. And when we know what they are, and when we can start using the one that creates connection over the one that creates disconnection, our lives can look very differently and our relationships look very differently.
So you're saying there's the animal part of us that just wants to procreate and have pleasure really for themselves, I would say. And then there's the other part that wants to bond with the other and bring up a union together because it expands. If I can merge with someone else and I'm expanded and we expand consciousness in general. Is that a fair way of saying that?
That's a fair way of saying it. And then the neuroscience part of it is like the animal part, I'm just saying, if we keep engaging in the procreation kind of lower a way of making love, it's connected to dopamine, a dopamine release. And that dopamine release is really not that good for us. It puts us energetically, emotionally on a roller coaster. And so when we can learn to make love in a different way, where we don't get into this dopamine roller coaster, because this other way, the more ascended way, uses oxytocin, we become very emotionally stable. And when we become very emotionally stable, we're way more patient, way more kind, lighthearted, resourceful, and just more harmonious with everybody in our life, including the person that we're with.
So Carolin, what is the difference between, is it these two forms of lovemaking, and how does it play out in relationships?
Yeah, so the difference, I don't know if I want to give that away today or on the show.
Okay, you don't have to give us all the details, but just
give some of it away because people want a little taste. Come on, we're here for listening to you. So, I mean, am I being demanding in our relationship? So, no, I'd love to hear some of it, just to give me a taste.
Yeah, so we can get an idea of where we're going.
I'm gonna preface it with it's controversial, and people, when they at first hear it, they go like, "Oh, really?" And they kind of like say, "Oh, I don't think this could be it," and they have a tendency to not want to listen anymore. So I'm just gonna preface that so that what I'm gonna say, you actually continue listening, because there's a lot of misconceptions. So I'm also gonna say that we in our chemistry and our physical makeup and in how we are made up as humans, we do have reward systems, and one of them is an orgasm, right? Nature rewards us for making babies by huge amounts of pleasure through the dopamine release when we have an orgasm. That's how nature basically makes sure that nature survives. It's not necessarily the best for our unions, so to speak, because
it could be good for, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm just saying it is good for the union when orgasm is a kind of cosmic energy coming into the body.
Well, this is where the misconception is, and this is where it's hard for people to understand, to grasp. And I have to be honest, I have to say, when I started hearing about these concepts, I was very much coming from a place where I was very sexually repressed, and I think I've never had made love without being high or having alcohol till my late 20s, right? And then finally freed myself, finally was in a place where I was enjoying it. And I was very much advocating like having lots and lots of sex, having lots and lots of orgasms. And I thought that's what it meant to be sexually free and healed. And then I came across this book. And
Carolin, were you, at that time, were you already an intimacy coach, or family constellator, or doctor? You were, okay.
Yeah, I was. I was working with people and I was very much helping women with sexual empowerment and freeing themselves and helping sexual trauma and all of that. But my own relationships were so volatile, so volatile. And so because of that, I was willing to entertain that maybe there's something to it. There's maybe something to happens in my brain when I have an orgasm, how it impacts my perception and neurochemistry. And I was willing enough, or was desperate enough, to basically say, okay, let me try this other way, which this other way does not include an orgasm. And this is where we lose most people, because they're like, what are you talking about? Not an orgasm. Well, but there's an and. You don't have an orgasm, but and you have something that feels even better, if you can believe it or not, because our brain is actually also set up to release huge amounts of good feeling hormones, just different kinds of hormones, for bonding, right? So nature rewards us for procreating with an orgasm, but nature also rewards us with some really good feeling, amazing feeling, very satisfying feeling, different than an orgasm feeling, but in my opinion, better feeling. Feelings when we learn to make love in this other way.
But what's wrong with an orgasm, and why can't you have both?
Yeah, so it's literally that we have these two tracks in our mind. When we have an orgasm, the brain releases dopamine, a huge amount of dopamine, and it's when you look at brain scans and scientifically, you can see the brain scans of somebody who just shot cocaine or heroin. They're identical with somebody who just had an orgasm.
Yeah, but so what? That doesn't mean anything. They're just dopamine. I mean, but what's wrong with the orgasm? I mean, what's wrong? What's in the way? So, okay, you get this like rush of chemicals, but why is that in the way of the other thing? I'm not understanding.
So as a normal healthy human being, would you think that having a high from cocaine every day would be good for you and your brain, how you feel?
Well, if the chemicals were endogenous, it would be a kind of way of energizing yourself, especially if you do the microcosmic orbit, as Mantak Chia says, and for men and women, bringing it up and circulating the jing, the chi deep.
Yeah, so that's different, right? So this other way actually entails not expelling your energy and learning how to circulate it, but when we make love, we don't do that, right? We just right? We don't learn how to circulate our energy.
Really? So, I learned that. I mean,
yeah, you are very, I don't think you're like the average population.
I guess not, because because sex, and it's about pleasure but it's also about energy. It's about, really more about energy.
Definitely. So that's a great question.
Go ahead.
Tangelia. So when you're saying no orgasm, but there still is an energetic exchange and an energy.
Exchange. Very. I mean, you still have sex and make love by connecting your genitals and doing other things. I don't want to get too graphic, but
you can get graphic. This is an adult audience.
Okay, good. Good.
I was going to tell a story. It's very personal, but I was like with this woman, and we're in let's say intercourse, and that we had to be very sort of quiet, but so I was like inside, if you want to call it that, for like a long time, because we were just kind of slowly moving. It wasn't like wham bam. And then at one point she stuck her tongue in my mouth, and this electrical energy just went through my whole body. It's like, that was amazing.
So you're out of the thousands of people that I've talked to, you actually have an experience of what I'm talking about, just to give you an idea of how rare this is,
Yes. Yeah. No, I do, but I think also the orgasm, some people say an orgasm for women is healthy. I mean, men want to hold the energy, but for women, they expand. And now you're saying no, they do not. What kind of orgasm are you talking? I mean,
the best way to really find this out is learn about what this other way is, and then really do it for a month and see how you overall feel. Great, it can feel an orgasm, obviously in the moment can feel amazing, but then how do you feel if you don't do anything, if you don't do coffee, other drugs, no other sex, no more orgasms? If you really pay attention to how you feel the 2 weeks after, which is the period that the brain needs to come back to normal, I personally feel like shit.
You do? After an orgasm, you feel not so good?
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
maybe not 2-3 minutes later, but like a few hours later, the days later. Yeah, and
Well,
I
I
have
know if
comparison. No,
I
I have
feel
comparison with the other
exhausted
thing.
if I, but what's your other, okay, now that you've convinced us, tell us the other way.
Well, the other way is how you've described it. You know, it's a very different way of lovemaking where the focus is really on the connection and circulating the energy and keeping your energy going instead of expelling it. And you can be in that state. It's almost like a very deeply relaxing physical meditation with each other. You can stay in that state for a long time, for a short time, but it keeps re-energizing you, and it makes it so that you just feel, in general, in your life, in your everyday life, whether in bed with each other together or not, you just feel really energized, connected, and good. And you have energized energy to do the things that you want to do in life. You don't feel drained. You don't feel, you know, your health gets better. People look younger. What kind of sold me on it was that the author of the book, she had a video on YouTube, and she was already in her 70s. And I mean, she glowed, and I'm like,
what is the book you're talking about, Carolyn?
It's called Cupid's Poisoned Arrow.
And who wrote it?
Marnia Robinson.
Marnia Robinson. Let's get her on the show, Tangelia.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But
so Carolyn, this is, oh, go ahead, Alan.
No, go ahead. You go. I have
no, I was gonna say, this is really, you know, fascinating that you're really advocating this different type of lovemaking that's really not what people are talking about normally. And so this is, you know, is it one of the pieces of what you're coaching with couples? And do you think it's a very important piece?
I think so. It's a very important piece because everything that I teach people is about their own energy and about energy management. And a very big piece of what couples can do together is this piece. There's things that people can do individually, right? But this piece is a practice. So about a year ago, I had a download on what sacred unions really are, and that most people that get married, they really want a sacred union, but then they have that one day event and not something that they can do every day to actually create a sacred union or keep it going. And so this practice, this other lovemaking, is a daily practice to really have a sacred union. And the only commitment in a sacred union is to that practice. Like, it's the commitment that you make is to each other and to this practice. You know, I like other promises.
I like what you're saying, because you know what the ancient Taoists say, it's good to get up from a meal while you're still a little hungry.
Yeah, so, and this originated with the Taoist movement, actually.
Right, the Taoists were, so if you instead of like satisfying completely that desire, you separate when there's still this like intensity, and that's hard to do. That's probably the hardest thing to do, because you just want more and more and more until like boom. But if you can,
so you learn to actually make love in a way where you don't get to that place where you're really satisfied and relaxed the whole time, right? If you're already feeling like you want more, that's the dopamine.
Oh,
yeah, dopamine is highly addictive, but it's 13 times more addictive than heroin.
So would you, well, it's your body's chemical, but you know, would you say then that you don't want to be too turned on, you're saying, in that?
Yeah. Part of the skill is to learn, you know, to be enough turned on so that something's happening, but relaxed enough that you're not feeling frustrated.
Right. So there's still that connection, and and
that the focus is really on each other and giving to each other and sending.
And it's not on pleasure or stimulation, you're saying?
It's on pleasure, but not on genital friction.
All right.
It's more on a whole body, you know, emotional, physical pleasure. Like, it feels very good in your heart. It feels very good. Like, your skin starts feeling really good, and you just feel this flow between each other. Yeah.
But to do that, you really have to be with someone you really, really love. You know, really.
Yeah, and you truly want to bond with, because you will bond with that person.
Yes. So it's not like a one night stand sort of practice that you want to do. You want to build the energy field, build the connection, and then build the physical container, because that's what the Taoists would do. They would circulate the energy. So the body double, the etheric body would be solid enough to actually become immortal. I mean, that was one of the keys to immortality.
See, that's why I think this is so crucial to ascension.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right.
So you said this comes from the Taoist movement. So how, did she study? Was she Taoist? Is that where these practices came from? And how does this relate to Tantra? For people who are watching or wondering.
Marnia first started reading Taoist texts and came across, you know, some of the concepts that Alan was mentioning. Then she also went into Tantra. She started studying other Christian esoteric texts where they also have a practice. So she just got really curious. She spent 16 years researching before publishing the book. And a lot of her input came from ancient texts from all kind of religions. And then she met her husband, I don't know how far into her journey, who had been a high school biology teacher and had a lot of he's done a lot of research into porn addiction in the brain. And so he had a lot of the neuroscientific studies and data. And so they started putting it together and practicing it together. And then she wrote the book basically, but it's really 16 years of research and putting the pieces together and making mistakes. She started out thinking that it was okay for women to have orgasms, but not for men. And then to practicing that and seeing that the relationships still weren't any stabler and still not any better, she started realizing that it was really for both of us. And then her husband brought the brain scans and the explanations for why we both genders aren't stable, yeah.
You know what also happens when you're doing lovemaking for a long time? There's other fluids that start to be generated in the body. It's not just semen or vaginal juices. It's other chemistry that kicks in.
Yeah.
When you can do that for a long time. I forgot what the Taoist, there's a whole Taoist literature from the Green Dragon school and the White
And
Tiger.
for me, in my practice, I help a lot of couples where they have been together for a while and they're just not attracted anymore. And there's a lot of explanation for why that is, because nature wants novelty, right? So and a lot of women think there's something wrong with their bodies, or they are hormonally off balance, or they had kids and so forth. And when they get introduced to these concepts and start making love in this other way, the body's lubricate, they feel it again. It's like, it all comes back in a different way.
Write a book called Making Love in This Other Way. That'd be a hit.
Yeah.
I think
and so, Carolin, you've seen a lot of couples. So you work with a lot of couples, obviously, married couples in particular. So you really see this method working for them.
Yes, and I have a lot of couples where.
What do you think? So what happens? What do you see before? And then why is this change occurring? Like what happens with the couples? I mean, do they rebuild intimacy? Are they able to stay together? Like, what are some of the transformations you see occurring?
Yeah. So a typical picture is they both like each other. They are good companions, but they just have no intimacy, right? And either for a long time or it's headed there. And they're more like roommates. And through these, and the women is usually like, I'm just not the touchy-feely type. It just doesn't feel good to me. It's just, I'm always tired. I just don't have a desire for it. And the guys just like, they're, please, 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 just give me some. And it has created this really bad dynamic between them, and she wants to make him happy, but, if she's not feeling it, she also wants to be honest to herself. And so generally for couples like that, it's really hard to imagine that in a few months they'd be both happy making love, every other day. And so I have a lot of people where when they first start, the women, they're like, what? Like, I'm never going to want to make love 2-3 times a week. And then 2 weeks later or 2 months later, when they have done these practices and helped their brains rewire, it's really about doing these practices and helping your brain to shift into a different gear. They're the ones that when they skip a day, they're like, we didn't make love today. Like, what's wrong?
So the love making is a doorway then to deepening the relationship, but then there has to be more than that. I mean, that's just the physical and energetic, but how do you then take it to like the emotional level? How do you work that in to more intimacy with sharing one's deeper, I guess, sense of being or something?
Well, so this other way of the bonding-based lovemaking requires connection. It doesn't work if you're not emotionally connecting. And so that's where my expertise comes in, right? With the constellations, when people do the practices and they're unable to stick to the schedule, or they find excuses why they can't do it, or, all kinds of resistance comes up, then we do the deeper subconscious clearing work to see whether they had childhood trauma. A lot of people, they didn't really have the attachment, a healthy attachment that any baby needs, so there's a lot of healing and repatterning around attachment styles and healing those early wounds when that's brought up through the lovemaking practice, right? And then we use that as data and keep working on the healing.
Well, family constellations is so fascinating. It's actually one of my favorite things to think about and talk about and do. And I definitely want to study it. And in the constellations,
I train people.
Well, maybe we'll do something. But there's a field. This is how I met Bert Hellinger, who created, and I've seen him work, and it's just a miracle what he would do.
Yeah.
He would just look at people and just say, oh yeah, there was this, abortion back 3 generations ago. And that was like, but anyway, in the field of the family, there's a certain energetics of lovemaking. So if your parents made love a certain way, actually a Taoist say if your parents made love and they didn't have enough energy, you don't have that much energy. But if there's ways, subconscious, or I would call them field energetic effects that is passed down generation to generation. And maybe it was very disconnected. So if you use family constellations, how do you re-energize or undo the constellation of those fields of lovemaking that existed within the lineage? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, we literally do constellations on those things. We do constellations on a lovemaking program. We do constellations on shame and guilt. We do constellations on healing the feminine and masculine. We do constellations on healing your connection to your core sexual power. Like, we do very intentional, they're pretty much prescripted constellations that we do when I work with people.
Wow. And that's amazing. So is that something that you have developed in your own practice? Bringing in the family, because I think that's very powerful, because like Alan is saying, like, there is so much that we carry in terms of intimacy, bonding, love making, in our family lineage, in our structure.
And normally when you do constellations, you don't necessarily do a prescriptive one. You see what the field wants to see. But when I work with people, over the years, I've just realized everybody needs one on their amygdala. The amygdala is the place in our brain that guards whether we're relaxed or not, whether we perceive threat or not. And if we had any kind of trauma or anything, oftentimes that is off. Right. And so we do constellations on the nervous system, the amygdala, all these things, the attachment styles.
So you have a kind of a sequential course or levels that you take people through as you work with them, and couples, particular, or individuals as well, though, right?
Yeah.
So you want to talk about that? You don't have to go into detail, but just like, what's the levels you go through?
Yeah. So the first level is really for everybody to understand that there's, everything's energy, and we're all made up of energy, and that there's energetic frequencies. And this is not my work. This is David R. Hawkins' work. He's passed, but he used to live in Sedona, and he created the map of consciousness. And he shared with us that anytime that we vibrate higher than 200, our life goes better and better. And anytime we are below 200 in like fear, shame and guilt are the lowest vibrational frequencies, our energy is very low. And so the way that I look at relationships is like, when relationships really flow and do well, it means that they're above 200. They're usually at 300, 400, 500. And if they're deteriorating, it's because they're below. And so that's the first step to understand. And then we look at when a couple comes in or an individual comes in, I look at like what's keeping them below 200. That's the first step,
Good. No, I have an interview with David Hawkins, one of the few that he.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Yeah, he was quite brilliant. And the key he said in the interview, he actually had a Kundalini awakening that opened up his mind when he was young, really young. Yeah. And I think, I'd love to talk about where this intersects with Kundalini energy, this other way of love making, because it's usually that orgasmic feeling that actually can activate the Kundalini. Because then what's that connection that you have between?
I think, Kundalini energy is always present. And I feel, I didn't have a Kundalini awakening that I would call, that like an out of body experience or anything like that. That was very pleasurable at some point, but I definitely feel very energized, and I feel like I'm using that energy, and I'm very, in tune with that energy through the practice, So
right. So getting back to also what you said, so do you actually measure the people's quality of relationship on a scale? Like the couple comes to you and you do a little measurement and say, oh, your relationship's only 150. Do you tell them that or something like
No. I mean, if they come to me, their relationship is not super, super in the dump, right? That's already a sign. Somebody who is
Wow.
looking for help is already like on the upward trend.
Right.
Hmm.
And so, but do you measure it and then you see
You
the
could.
progress?
You could measure it. Usually it's by the way they feel,
So how do you connect? Okay, we know how to connect physically, but how do you get people to open up to the deeper intimacy, even if they love someone? How do they, if it's not in their field, their energy, to really share because they're used to being isolated? How do you get them to awaken that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so different for everybody, Usually the reason why people are not connecting is because they don't feel safe. And so it could be ancestral trauma. It could be something that they have experienced in this lifetime. It could be something past life related. It could be that their heart, needs to be healed. So that's where the constellations come in, where we just use the constellation to, to see whatever needs to happen for that person. For some people, it might have to heal the connection to their mom. For somebody else, they might have to heal the connection to the divine. For somebody else, they need to, they're carrying a lot of ancestral stuff that they have to give back. Somebody else, was very hurt in a past life and that hasn't been healed. So it's different for everybody why that is, but it's generally because they're not safe. And so we work on finding out those pieces where the not feeling safe is caused.
Oh, so you're like a scientist, and then you go through each aspect of the human being and say,
Yeah.
where are they not fulfilling their divine potential with themselves and with their partner?
And with the constellations, the beautiful thing is you can always, you can constellate it. You can place the person and the block, and you don't need to know what the block is. And by stepping into it, you find that, it's like it's a very collaborative, investigative journey, and it's different for everybody. There's universal themes, obviously, but.
Well, that's exciting. I'm really happy with you sharing your work, because I think the other way of lovemaking and the constellation work are keys to activating potentials that we don't even know we have. So,
Exactly. Yeah, it's very powerful and it's very different, right? I mean, Alan, you've interviewed many different intimacy coaches and love coaches. And, I think you're working at all of these different levels of being and with frequency and vibration, which is what we know is
definitely,
process.
Yeah, it's working on the physical, the emotional, the energetic, and the spiritual on all 4 levels,
And are people comfortable when they come to you? Like, do they know this is kind of your body of work, or they usually have never heard of frequency, vibration, never heard of family constellation?
It's a mix.
Coming to a regular, their love therapist, love coach. So is it usually a surprise for people?
Well, generally, the people that I attract are somewhat open and they are somewhat more spiritual, but for some of them, it's definitely a stretch, but they do, like, imagine being in a relationship where you haven't had sex for 5 years, but you really love the person and you want to bring it back. Like, that's why usually people are willing to go there, because they have tried everything else. And, even though this is so out there, we have good testimonials, they can trust me as a person, generally, like they feel like there's a connection with me and they trust me enough. Somehow I make enough sense, that they say, okay, let me try this. I have no idea what you're talking about. Can't even imagine what you're talking about, but I do want to have this intimacy with my wife or my husband back. And
so do you tell them, I mean, how do they build the attraction if there's been like no charge for a year? What do you mean?
Through the practices, it will come back, it's just really.
What are those practices again? Oh, you don't want to give it all away, but what's one of those practices?
Well, learning to make love in a way where it's not just about avoiding orgasm, but there's a lot of touch and things that we do that register as bonding when they're done with the intention of caring and comforting, right? When we're touching another person kind of just because we want something for them, the amygdala registers that and doesn't let us bond or feel relaxed and feel good. And so, it's not so much about what we do, it's about in the intention and how we do it. And so that's
there's a lot of more sensuality. It's not like just intercourse. You're developing like a whole body awareness of that other person, because,
You get to know each other through touch. So for example, this kind of touch could feel really comforting to one person. Like to me, it feels really comforting. To you, it could feel really belittling. And so it's doing these things, these practices, physical practices, and learning about each other and finding out what feels comforting to me, what feels comforting to you, and then doing them. And then also moving into lovemaking.
So, but that's not just the same session. You want to build up to that, right? You want to build.
Oh yeah, that takes weeks usually.
So like the sensual awareness, in a way, it's a little old fashioned in a good way. It's like probably what they used to do before people just jumped into bed together. They would have that kind of courtship.
And, courtship and more reverence for each other, and
reverence, and getting to know that person, and not just then using them, because I guess a lot of sex is just kind of getting off with the other person, but not the deep connection. So that sounds great. So where can people find you? How can they sign up? Tangelia, let's sign up.
That's amazing. I know Carolin and her work, but I just love how multidimensional your work is, Carolin. Incredible.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me share.
How can people find you then?
The easiest way to find me is just by Googling my name, going to my website, going to Facebook. It's all in my name, Carolin, like Caroline without an E. Carolin, I'm German. And then Hauser, Hauser. And I'm sure Tangelia and Alan, you guys have the links. And it's very easy for me to connect on Facebook. I'm on Facebook a lot. If you want to send me a message, I'm pretty much always there. So I hang out. And my website. Yeah,
I put your email or your website in the chat there. And so one more question before we go. So this conference that's coming up, the 2 days, is about ascension. So it's great to be sensual. It's great to have the energy, but ascension is a whole other thing. In my understanding what ascension is, because people have been sensual and doing everything you're doing for eons, but they haven't ascended. They've been very much earth-based, which is nothing wrong with that, but we're all going to another level. So how does this work into this? You may have said in the beginning of the show, but talk about that.
Yeah, it's really about the energy, right? So if you disperse your energy by having an orgasm, you kind of stay in a lower vibrational frequency. Basically, if you learn to cultivate this energy and just keep it going, your energy becomes just stronger and stronger. So I believe actually that Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that they were a couple, and that they knew this practice and that they practiced this together. And because of it, they were able to perform miracles, right? Because it put them into such a high state of mastery, energy mastery and consciousness.
Actually, in one of the famous Taoist books, I think it's the Yellow Emperor book, the Yellow Emperor himself ascended after making love to 100, maybe they were virgins, or just 100 concubines, where he was able to just not orgasm. And then after, not saying you have to have 100, but it's like there was this energetic that he held, and then he ascended. But he was taught that practice by 3 different Taoist women, the Jade woman, the Dark woman, and there was a third woman who taught these practices to the Yellow Emperor, who was like the head Taoist. He started the Taoist tradition in ancient China. So there is a history of ascension with that type of practice. So you are onto something. So I think so. Let's ascend. Yes, definitely.
Exactly. Amazing, Carolin. Like, what an incredible perspective for us, right, Alan? It's just, and bringing in, and you're familiar even from your own Taoist background and philosophy.
Yeah, and I mean, thanks for asking all your questions and being a little, standoffish or what, because it is somewhat out there. And but I am
I think it's
because I've had the experience I've had. I'm just, there's nothing that can sway me that there's anything better. I feel like I really know, so.
I don't think it's so out there. I think it's the next level, as Tangelia
Thanks. That's what I think. So I've already convinced you. Very good.
Without even convinced me. It's next level. Good. Next level. Next level sex and love and making it all that. Right. I mean, so I'm glad you're going to be part of this weekend. And what will you be sharing in that talk that you'll be doing?
Just more of that, more like a little bit more about.
Yeah. How long have you been doing this practice?
6 years. I came across the book 6 years ago. Yeah.
And what's the book again? Because I want to get that book.
Yeah, get it. Everybody get it. It's called Cupid's Poison Arrow. And Marnia wrote the book. She's a lawyer. She doesn't teach this stuff. She wrote the book, you know, and so she's very happy that there's me who wants to be out there and speak about it and teach it. And
did you study with her personally?
she doesn't teach it.
But did
She's
you
not-
connect? Did you meet
Yeah.
her?
Not in
Oh.
person, but we talk. She talks with me and I can come to her when I need help.
Well, you might like the White Tiger books, White Tigress, Green Dragon books. 'Cause
Yeah, sounds like it.
some of the Mata Chia stuff, but I mean, there's great stuff in Mata Chia, and then there's some other Taoist sexual cultivation. And the question that Tangelia asked, the kind of the Taoist tantric thing, I think the tantric thing is good on one level, but I think they're missing the Taoist cultivation practices. That's my understanding. Would you say that's true
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
Tantra?
Yeah, somebody who has done some tantra, they definitely have an easier time with like learning to circulate and, you know, learning like being together and being present. You know, for somebody who hasn't done anything, that's a little harder to learn.
Mm.
But the bonding-based lovemaking is not focused on any kind of orgasm, whereas tantra is very much focused on elongating orgasm. My understanding of it. I've never taken a tantra class. Just to
Yeah.
be
No, the
clear.
Tantra class, it's okay. I mean, Tantra classes have more of that bonding in it as opposed to the Taoist stuff, which is a
Yeah.
little impersonal in some
Yeah.
ways. And
Yeah.
so I think a
Yeah,
good
and the
combination.
Taoists could, yeah, the Taoists could come across as, you know, men just using women for their consciousness, obviously, you know.
And women too. Women use men for cultivating that too.
Yeah, but the
tantric
ideal
thing-
is that we come together and ascend together, right?
Right, Ascension
Yeah.
Together. I have an organization that I connect with who's called Ascension Together. But, you know, so I think in this new time, we have to take the best of all these ancient practices and find that like golden thread that works and takes us all to the next level and awakens the deeper potential. And I think what you're talking about, Carolyn, is awakening the deeper potential within the body, the mind, the spirit, the discipline, it's in a way, it's like a mystery school practice, you know?
Mhm. Yes.
And
exactly.
Carolyn, is there breathing involved in some of your practices? I know
Yeah.
that is a part of a lot of ancient lovemaking
Mhm.
practices, Tantra, Taoist, you know, like the breath work and breathing. So is that a part of what you teach as well?
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Okay.
eye gazing, of course, too, because
Eye
you have-
gazing
Amazing.
deeply.
I know deeply, because I think eye gazing stabilizes the orgasmic energy. You know, I think it's
Well,
like
eye gazing is one. So there is bonding behaviors that we get rewarded for because, you know, as a human being, if we don't bond to an infant, the infant dies. And so there is bonding cues like eye gazing, feeling a heartbeat, feeling skin to skin that
Mhm.
releases the oxytocin that rewards us for those things too. You know?
Right. So there's so many practices, but those are natural if we want to know that person. So
Yeah.
you have to connect with someone you really want to know and know their bodies and their mind and their emotions. And, you know, Michio Kushi says, don't sit down to dinner with someone unless you're ready to pick up the whole check, you know? No, it's a little more Taoist stuff. But this has been, I would say, enlightening, Tangelia. This is
Definitely
really
so fascinating. I mean, I love it. It is, Carolyn, your work is really next level. And whether or not people agree with your practice and your method, it's just so amazing and beautiful that you're putting this out there, that
Yeah.
you're bringing this forth as a practice that people can do for, you know, for
Yeah, I mean, 40 years ago, nobody knew what yoga was, and everybody thought it was something very strange from the East, you know, and this is how it's going to be with this thing. I think
No, no.
it used to be normal for us to make love in this way, and we only made love the other way when we would have babies, you know.
Well,
That's what
I think though I think this way should be the foundation for having a baby, really, because that baby
Yeah.
wants to be created. So I don't think they have to be two separate things. I think they can be integrated, especially if you're intentionally conceiving, which is the
Yes.
best way. So,
Yeah.
you know, you can have it all. You can have your cake and eat it. You can have it all in one go there, because that's the best way to conceive, is with the intention and the love, so that baby
Yes,
is
I agree.
conceived. And that's another thing the Taoists say, the energy that goes into conception is more important than the astrological energies at birth, because
Wow.
passion, also in the intensity of the parents and the intention, is what goes into that spark that unites the sperm and egg. This is a Taoist intention practice. And so you know, you can tell if that intention is there the moment conception arrives. You can actually, there's actually an energetics of that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting. So there's so much more to the human being, which is what Soul Search is all about, isn't it? Tell us about Soul
Exactly.
Search.
No, and
Tangelia.
I mean, in Soul Search, I mean, Carolyn is such a beautiful example of Soul Search. And what we're really doing is we're, bringing together healers and practitioners, energy workers who, understand frequency, vibration, multidimensionality.
Yes. So
That sounded like a big applause.
Bringing all of these together for healing, and transformation, because, we are told we only have these traditional routes of, traditional therapy. If you have a physical illness, the traditional doctor, whereas really the world is open to us, and we can heal on so many different levels, with family constellation, with energy work, and with, these, alternative therapies that you're bringing forth. So that's what we do at Soul Search, is we bring together healers, teachers, and guides that are really the next level healers and guides that can really empower us in our own healing journeys.
Yeah, let's play that opening from Soul Search. You have that? Should I try to find it? You have that trailer from Soul Search?
I have to find.
What is it called? I'm looking for it. Well, anyway, but you find it and I'll talk. Soul Search is an organization I recommend everyone go to, soulsearch.io. It's networking for the spiritually inclined, including the Taoist, tantric, energetic, light language, channeling, healing, astrology. What else do we have there? Any sort of spiritual awakening that that you're interested in is listed there, and the practitioners and the community of people that are excited about combining moving together with other people. So it's like it's a whole network that Tangelia, who founded this company, really wants to network our community worldwide. So do you have that up? Do you have
I have the video. Do you want me to just play it, or do you?
You play it.
You
share screen.
Okay, perfect. Hold on. Let me just do that. Let me.
And press share sound and video. So yes.
Okay, hold on. Let me pull this up.
Okay. There you go. So this is a little trailer for
times. Are you seeking friends and collaborators, like-minded, brilliant, beautiful?
Let me share my screen real quick, and then you can.
Okay.
Do that. Sorry, Alan.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay.
You're good.
So
I just want because I couldn't find mine.
You guys see it?
No. Share screen. Click on the thing. Click on the video. That you have to click on it on your
the actual video.
When you share this, when you go to share screen, click on the video that is of the thing you want to share.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Let me see.
There we go. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Now you want to, there we go. Okay, full screen. Okay.
Extraordinary times. Are you seeking friends and collaborators, like-minded, brilliant, beautiful souls who want to be a part of creating the new earth? Here is the answer. Welcome to Soul Search. Soul Search is the high-frequency global online destination for spirituality and consciousness, where people from around the globe like you come together for spiritual exploration. This is a multi-dimensional community for spiritual seekers, healers, teachers, and guides for the global awakening. With Soul Search, the spiritual seeker can easily search for and connect with healing modalities, spiritual teachings, practices, and practitioners. You can explore high vibrational online and in-person spiritual events across the globe. Within the Soul Search community, you can join groups or take courses for your spiritual journey. With Soul Search, you are part of an inclusive, growing global community for consciousness. For spiritually conscious practitioners, Soul Search connects you to a global audience seeking your services. Build your credibility with a robust profile that demonstrates your expertise and experience. Post client reviews, articles, videos, photos, and audio. You can create secure and private online communities for your groups and clients. Be a part of an awakening community for spirituality where you can collaborate and connect with practitioners and seekers. Whether you are a spiritual seeker, healer, or just curious, join soulsearch.io today. Don't miss out on this opportunity to be part of our high vibrational community for the global awakening. We're excited to be connecting with your soul and radiant light.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
There we go.
Well, that's why I love that community. I love what you're doing because it's really pulling a lot of people together.
Thanks. And that's what we want. And that's why we really want people to join us for the Ascension of the Soul Conference. This is why we're hosting this as an event for people around the country, around the globe, to start diving in, and really exploring these modalities that are available for healing, for transformation, for growth. Many of you out there have never heard of family constellation and experienced it, have not heard of bonding-based love banking, these are practices that Carolin is bringing forth as modalities for healing and transformation. And we have so many healers that are, have their own modalities that they have available for all of us. And so we really live in a really exciting time where we have all of this information, knowledge, wisdom, practice, and we can now start taking advantage of it for our own growth, our own ascension.
So how do we find the Awaken, that weekend? That Soul
So
Search
you
weekend?
can go to soulsearch.io/ascension conference, or you can also go to portaltoascension.org and under events, go to Ascension of the Soul. So both Portal to Ascension and Soul Search, we have it available on our website. And it's completely free to join. We encourage everyone to join us, to tune in, and you will have the replay available for free as well. So, it's just going to be an incredible weekend to be diving in with, incredible healers like Carolin and learning, growing, and, finding new ways to move forward that maybe you didn't know before.
Great. I put that in the YouTube chat.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Carolin. I look forward to seeing you in Sedona.
Yeah, Carolin, this was amazing. Thank you so much. Really, really mind opening, heart opening.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Tangelia. We have some other guests coming up in the next week or so, right?
We do. So we'll get those scheduled. All right. Thanks, Alan. And thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you both. I think it's great what you're doing, Carolin. It's really inspiring. And I think, it's definitely next level, as Tangi would say.
Thanks. Okay. You guys. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank